Welcome to the Prophecy Club. Our topic is actually bringing you the truth about this whole Russia-Ukraine war. But the title is Evil American Past Presidents Have Caused the Russia-Ukraine War. Now, as prophecy students, we really want to know about the Russia-Ukraine war because I'm going to show you why I think that it plays into and is probably the reason, the excuse for the Russians to attack and defeat America in 1 hour, as Revelation 18 and 50, 51, Jeremiah and Isaiah 13, 21, and 47 all say is going to happen. All right, now, before we get started, I want to invite you to come to our Prophecy, Healing, and Deliverance Conference. It's limited to 100 people. It's not going to be a big meeting. It's at the church, but we're going to have some local speakers from our church. And Leslie and I are going to be speaking. It's going to be a lot of fun. And I got an email the other day and say, I need some deliverance. I've done some past sins. I won't mention what they were. And I really need some deliverance. Are you going to be? Yes. Yes, we're also going to be talking prophecy and also healing and praying for people for miracles. If you want to come, I invite you to come. You want to go to prophecyclub.com and you click right there on the right side, Prophecy, Healing, Deliverance Conference. Go in and fill that out. Only 100 people can come, so it's limited. By the way, I hear it's already filling pretty quickly. Okay, also, if you need gold, 800-200 gold, especially if you have an IRA or 401k, you don't want to lose it. And if that stock market crashes and you got money in that stock market, or if you don't have money in that stock market, but if you have money in paper, like Lindsey Williams says, if you have your wealth in paper, it's good. The paper, it's good as the paper is written on. In other words, you can lose it. Gold and silver is a store of wealth. We don't buy it because we want to make money. We buy it because we want our money to stay with us, especially if you have some money, unlike us ministers. All right, let's go on. Okay, so first article, truce or trap? Heavy on the word trap. Truce or trap? Ukraine makes sure peace talks go nowhere. I'm going to show you that I don't think Russia is the bad guy in this. Now, I'm not saying that they're a Christian nation and they're wonderful. They've certainly done their bad things or the list of bad things, but then so has America. We've had some bad leaders, obviously, with Biden and others. We've had some bad leaders too. But I'm going to show you something from a prophecy standpoint today. I think you'll find it interesting. This is, as a prophecy student, this is what I suspect. I can't prove this, but I suspect it. This is my suspected plot of what's really going on with Ukraine and Russia. We do know, as a fact, that Russia was formed by the Illuminati with the goal to balance or to overthrow America. Even Stanislav Lunev, when I had lunch with him back in 1998, a Russian, highest Russian military officer ever to defect in America, he confirmed. He said that the purpose and point of Russia is to destroy America. He said every child going through school, everybody in America is taught and trained, your objective is to destroy America. Isn't that what? Terrible. Anyway, if Russia attacks, it destroys America in 1 hour, as the prophecies say. We know it will one day. But if they do it without cause or provocation, the rest of the world is going to rise up in arms against Russia. And that's sort of what does happen, but Russia knows that they have to have a plan. They need to be able to say to the world, look it, they attacked us first. And I think, as I've covered in other programs, that we've already done some things wrong, but that was primarily the Biden administration. We've done some wrong things that Russia could say, there you go, America attacked us first. Now, with that in mind, let's look into this. Dmitry Duda in 1984, I'm not going to read the first part of it there. You're familiar with that many times. But the angel said, when God will hit America, all the nations will be terrified. Then God will raise up China, Japan, and many of the nations. They'll defeat the Russians, back them to the gates of Paris, where they sign a peace treaty. But they make the Russians their leader. with all the nations of the Russian at their leader, meaning there's a very good possibility that the Antichrist comes from Russia. Stan, do you think he does? Not necessarily, but the Russians are definitely involved in Armageddon. They are the primary players coming down to attack Israel. Now, so they make the Russians the leader. All the nations with the Russians as the leader go against Israel. It's not that they want to, God makes them. God puts a hook in their jaws and draws them down to attack. That is the separation of the wheat from the tares, so that he can destroy them easily with the morning star. Or actually, that's the slashing of the grapes. Now, the point is, so Russia comes down to attack. They have to have a reason. They can't just come down and just attack. They have to have a reason to attack America. So the first question is, what could be the reason? Michael Snyder had a dream where he was warned, tell everybody to pray that Trump will not be arrogant, not be pushy, not try to force his way around. If he does, in the negotiations with Russia, it will backfire severely. So God is trying to give us more time, but right now it doesn't appear that we are listening to that. I mean, I think Steve Witkoff is apparently doing a fine job, and I don't like Trump calling Putin crazy. No. Matter of fact, Donald Trump, if you will call me, I would give you a prophecy student's advice. And here's what I would say. First of all, and matter of fact, I pray most every evening, Lord, open the eyes of Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump, and his negotiating team with the Russians. Help them to see the plot and the plan that is primarily the evil Ukrainians, the Nazis. That's where Nazism started, in Ukraine, okay, Kazakhstan. Help them to see that the Ukrainians are evil and the problem, and that Russia is only trying to protect Mother Russia. I'll explain. Help them to see that, and help them instead to walk away from Ukraine. I think we ought to stop all help, all money, all military, get all boots out of everything. Stop all help to Ukraine. Then I think that Trump ought to go over and make friends with Putin like he did with Saudi Arabia and Dubai and the recent Arabs. I think he ought to go over and make friends. And then I think that we ought to have the same kind of negotiations, the same kind of business deal that they're working with Saudi Arabia. And he's working with other countries. We need to start good trade. I think that Trump should drop all sanctions off of Russia. We need to, as the old saying says, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. So don't just keep your friends close, keep your enemies even closer. That means he needs to be friends with Russia. Now, I'm still making a point here. So now let's go to Albert Pike. So he had this vision, August 15th of 1871. Who's Albert Pike? Well, he started the Illuminati. He wrote a book called, I dropped the name of it. On the front of it says Ordo Ab Chao. Albert Pike, what was the name of the book? It'll come to me in a second. Been doing this a long time. Albert Pike received a vision, and he described in a letter he wrote to Mazzini, his friend, back in 1871, and graphically outlined the plans of how they would take over the world. And in order to do that, they would need to start 3 world wars. And that would bring about their world government so they could put their man, the Antichrist, on the throne. Number one, this can tie in, okay? If you want to understand what's really going on, you got to understand this. So the first world war would be between Russia, brought about to permit Illuminati to overthrow the power of czars of Russia, making Russia a communist nation. Did that happen? Yes. The divergencies caused by the agents of the Illuminati between the British and the Germanic empires, true, will be used to foment this war. At the end of the war, communism would be built and used in order to destroy the other governments and to weaken the religions. That happened. Then the Second World War is going to be between the fascists, that's Germany, and the political Zionists, that's Israel. This war must be brought about so that Nazism is destroyed. That's what happened. Germany, it didn't destroy it in Switzerland too bad, and it didn't destroy it in Ukraine too bad, but it did take it out in Germany. And the political Zionism, to become strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel and Palestine. During the Second War, international communism must be strong enough in order, here it is, to balance or to destroy Christianity, i.e. America, which would then be restrained and held in check. So Russia is what God has allowed, God allowed it, to keep America in check and one day destroy America. Did that happen? Yes, that's happened. Third World War. This must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences between the agents of the Illuminati, world government, and the political Zionists, Israel. Okay, so that's Armageddon, what we're talking about. The leaders of the Islamic world, of course, Leslie was told that Israel and America will go against most of the Islamic world or the Arabs, and that the Arabs will lose big time because we know from about 8 different scriptures in Ezekiel 38 and 39 that when Israel is attacked, and when Russia and her allies comes down to attack Israel, they dwell safely, all of them. So we know that someplace in there, Islam, the Arab nations around Israel, get kicked bad. Then, now here's the point. If you want to understand what's going on, we shall unleash the nihilists and the atheists. We should provoke a formidable social cataclysm. In other words, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So you can't have a new world order till you break the old world order, and that's their objective. Ordo ab chaos means order out of chaos. That's on the front of Albert Pike's book. And what does that mean? It means order out of chaos. What order? A new world order. Out of what chaos? A chaos they create. Got to break the old system to bring in the new system. And that's the whole point behind the Federal Reserve and destroying the dollar. And that's the reason our dollar has gone down, because they have to destroy this system to bring in a new system, and they're about to do it, sad to say, with President Trump's cooperation, though he may not understand, probably does not understand what's really going on. Let's go on. A formidable social cataclysm, with all its horror, will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and of the most bloody turmoil. That's what they want World War III to be. World War III is not Armageddon, but it will lead to Armageddon. So what they want to do is to destroy the old world order, bring in the new world order. That's what it's saying. Then it were the citizens obliged to defend themselves against this world minority of revolutionaries. In other words, these evil, just pure evil. I mean, even this Satanists don't want that evil because they have to have some kind of order, okay? So they'll exterminate those destroyers of civilization and the multitude disillusioned with Christianity. And who's that disillusioned with Christianity? Well, they didn't get their pre-trib rapture. Whose deistic spirits from that moment will be without compass or direction, anxious for an ideal. I'm going to show you something here in just a second. Stick with me. But without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, finally brought out to the public. In other words, this guy here, he is God, pointing to the Antichrist, which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, all conquerors and exterminated all at the same time. You take the mark, you lose your head. Now, here's the Russian proposal for peace. And I tell you, in my opinion, I think it's reasonable. I think Ukraine is the problem. I know that's not what the news is telling you, but I think the news is not telling you the truth. I just had a good friend of mine call me the other day. He has a lot of news coming to him from Israel. And he says that America, our news, is the most corrupt news in the world. We are the most uninformed people in the world. The rest of the world gets a whole lot more truth than us. So here's the Russian proposal for peace summarized. We know that Reagan and Gorbachev agreed that the West would not move, quote, 1 more inch to the east if Russia would tear down this wall. Remember, Reagan said, Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Then the years later, secret CIA comes along and removed the old or the real Ukrainian leadership and installed Western-friendly leadership. Why? Because it's part of the Western's move to destroy Russia. Now, does the West really want to destroy Russia? No. It's trying to give Russia the excuse to attack and destroy America. Since then, the West has added Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland, all against the agreement that said we will not move 1 inch more towards the east. Russia wants to have a buffer zone. Would we like it if the Russians started moving missiles on the Mexican and in the Canadian border? Would we put up with that? No. And Russia's not going to put up with us moving closer and closer to where we can destroy them. That's how they see it. So, evil American leadership has violated past agreements. America has caused the Russia-Ukraine war by breaking encroachment agreements. We are the ones that broke the agreements. Primarily, that's what the thing says. Russia is only asking for safety for Russians. Russia wants a buffer zone between Russia and the Western powers. They don't want any NATO, no boots, no military assistance coming to Ukraine at all, and they want to return a previous Russian territory and the newly conquered territory. Well, like the old saying says, to the victor goes the spoils. Well, Ukraine is pretty much defeated, according to several articles, several sources out here. Now, let me go to the point. Here's the details of the Russian peace proposal revealed. Kyiv, or Ukraine, must withdraw their troops from the former Ukrainian territories that have now joined Russia and confirm its neutral and non-nuclear status. Okay, in other words, you got to pull out. You got to give us this territory. What territory? Well, I'm not an expert on this, but my understanding is it used to be Russia. Some of it didn't used to be Russia, has mostly Russian-speaking people in it, and what is there is a bunch of Nazis. And Nazis are, again, the most evil people on the planet. They do child sacrifice, they steal, they have child sex trafficking rings. Most of the evil on the planet originally comes out of Nazis. That's why we fought them in World War II, and that came out of Ukraine. Okay, now let's go on down. The final settlement agreement of the conflict would require international recognition of the former Ukrainian territories as parts of Russia. That would mean America. The two Donbass republics, as well as Kherson and Zaporizhzhia regions, officially joined Russia following a series of referendums in autumn of 2022. They, the people, voted to join Russia. Crimea also voted to rejoin Russia. So, you know, if they've voted to join Russia, let them join Russia. I mean, who can stop that? I mean, if Texas voted to form its own nation, are the other 49 states going to put up with that? Well, we have agreements. That's not supposed to happen. But anyway, let's go on. Ukraine would also have to withdraw all of its forces and armed groups from those territories, the document states. In other words, we want back our territory, the territory that used to be ours and the territory that we have now conquered. That's a reasonable request. Again, to the victory goes the spoils. Now, Kyiv would also have to reaffirm its neutral status and introduce a ban on any and all military activities by third-party states on Ukrainian territory. In other words, the West, America and NATO. We want the military away from our border. That's what they're saying. We don't want Western military at our border, as well as withdrawing from international treaties incompatible with its status. It would also have to reaffirm its nuclear-free status. It's not going to just like we would not put up with Russian nuclear weapons on our Mexican border. We wouldn't have it, okay? They're saying the same thing. Skipping down, the memorandum expects Ukraine to set certain limits on the size of its armed forces. They don't want Ukraine building up armed forces again. So they just want Ukraine to just settle down, be a place for people to live peacefully. That's all they're asking. Also, all Ukrainian nationalist armed groups within the armed forces of the National Guard also have to be disbanded. In other words, You can have like a police force. It's kind of the same thing that Israel is saying to Gaza. We're not going to let you have a big military operation right next to Israel. We're not going to let you have a big military operation in Mexico right next to America. And we don't want a big military operation in Ukraine right next to Russia. Doesn't that sound reasonable? Yes, of course it does. That's what I'm saying. They're sounding reasonable. Under the peace proposal, Kyiv would have to guarantee the rights of the Russian and Russian-speaking people in Ukraine and, this is reasonable, grant Russians the status of official language. Okay? In other words, where we call it Russia, we want to be able to speak Russian. Matter of fact, I think that's a good idea in America. It's almost like there's so many people, I hear them in locker rooms and walking down the street talking another language. I feel like saying, you want to live in America? Speak English. I guess that's not too tolerant, but that's the way it used to be when I grew up. Everybody spoke English. Stop the persecution of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Well, we Christians think that's a great idea. Ban Nazi propaganda and any nationalist groups. In other words, shut down the Nazis. We did the same thing after World War II. The things that Russia is asking for, in my opinion, are reasonable requests, as well as lifting sanctions imposed on Moscow. Well, Ukraine doesn't have any sanctions. Who's he talking to? Talking to NATO mostly and to America, mostly to America. And that's the same thing I said. We need to be friends with the Russians. We need to help them remove the Nazis, not just from Ukraine, but from around the world. That's what we did in World War II. We're the guys that changed sides. World War II, our boys fought against Nazis, but today, the Nazis are who we're sending money and military equipment to. We're supporting the Nazis. We, America, is the problem here. Both Russia and Ukraine would renounce claims to compensation of damage linked to the conflict. In other words, look, I blew a bunch of your toys up, you blew a bunch of my toys up, we're going to call it a wash. Okay, don't expect us to fix what's broken. You shouldn't have done this in the first place. Now, what did Ukraine do that they shouldn't have done? Well, they allowed the CIA to come in and overthrow their real president and bring in a Western president, and this is all part of getting NATO to become, Ukraine to become part of NATO, because that's what the evil wanted to do, is keep encroaching on Russian territory till finally Russia has to rise up and do something. The document suggests, we're almost done, 2 options for reaching a ceasefire. One of them requires Kyiv to start withdrawing its troops. That's reasonable. From the Russian borders, and also a ban on any Ukrainian troop movements. In other words, we're not going to have boots on the ground right next to Russia. Also, to cease all Ukrainian mobilization campaign and Western military aid to Ukraine. If you want peace, act like you want peace, as in put down your arms. The same thing Israel is asking with Gaza. If Gaza wanted to have peace, all they have to do is put down their arms and release the hostages, and we have peace. Same thing. If Ukraine wants peace, all it has to do is put down its arms and start acting like it wants peace. Stop threatening Russia. Allow Russia to have peace. That's all Russia's asking for. If the roles were reversed, we'd be saying and doing the same thing. Ukraine would also have to lift martial law and set a date for presidential and parliamentary elections. In other words, they want a new president because the term for the current president, Zelensky, expired last May of last year or something like that. Also, they want a final peace treaty between Moscow and Kyiv to be signed after the new elections are in Ukraine. They want new leadership. I think it's all fair. So, what did Kyiv say? Kyiv reportedly rejected Moscow's demands for the recognition of Ukraine's former territories as parts of Russia, and also ruled out abandoning its ambition to join NATO. Ukrainian memorandum also demanded reparations from Russia. Ukraine, backed by America, is the problem. Look, if Trump wants, okay, Trump, you call me. Here's what you do. You totally walk away from Ukraine. No help, no satellite help, no dollars, no military, no boots, no advice, nothing. Then you go over to Putin and you say, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we have broken all of these agreements with you. I'm going to lift the sanctions. I want to start doing business with you. Let's start opening up some trade. Let's be friends. And I think you should take over Ukraine and remove all the Nazis out of it. The same thing our boys were trying to do in World War II. Put down these evil Nazis. That's all. It's all reasonable. Now, there's 7 hard questions that Mike Snyder has put out concerning the Pearl Harbor style attack on Ukraine, on Russia. Now, first of all, does anyone actually believe that Ukraine was able to pull off this without any outside help? No. This was actually Lindsey Graham and his buddies that are warmongers that are telling Ukraine, we stand behind you. This is evil Western people that are encouraging Ukraine to attack Russia. They're misinformed. They've been listening to the wrong news. 2, other than the Ukrainians, who knew about this attack in advance? My guess is somebody in the West. Somebody high in military sources in the West not only knew about it, they helped them plot and plan it. I don't think Ukrainians are smart enough to do it. Why were Russian bombers just sitting out in the open? Well, again, I suspect that Russian and Ukraine people, some of them, not all of them, are actually working together to try to get an excuse for Russia to attack and destroy America in 1 hour. So how much damage was actually done? Now, that's a good point. Some of them say it was only like 4 or 5 bombers. Others, it was 30% of the... My guess, it wasn't all that much damage. The Ukrainians know that Russia reserves the right to use nuclear weapons if their strategic nuclear assets, such as nuclear bombers, are hit. We talked about that on the program. I read articles from 2 years ago saying that they had changed their nuclear status. If Russia thinks they're about to be attacked, they can use nukes. They don't have to wait until they get hit with nukes. 6th question, how will the Russians respond? I think the Russians have so far showed a lot of restraint. It is the West that has continually stepped over the line. It's kind of like saying, I dare you to step over that line. And America steps over the line. So Russia backs up. I dare you to step over that line. So America steps over the line, Russia backs up. Russia's been doing that since Gorbachev tear down this wall. We're the ones that have stepped across the line time and time and time again. So why would the Ukrainians conduct such an attack if they knew the Russians would strike back really hard? Maybe because they're trying to start the problem?